Okay, you've listened to the long dissertation on how to do a punch. Your eyes are crossing, and you're reeling from the information. So now let us put some practical descriptions on those objectives that we did in the last video. Stay tuned! We'll talk about it. Welcome to Shihan's Dojo. I'm Shihan Marty Husband, and I'm here today to help you build your knowledge and skills in the martial arts. Or if you're here for the first time, tell you a little bit more about the martial arts. Now, if you're here for the first time and you haven't done so already, jab that subscribe button and punch the bell so we can notify you when we have a new video coming out. The question for the day is, what is your favorite punch to use in a self-defense situation? Let us know in the comments down there, and we can maybe get a big discussion about different techniques we like to use in self-defense. First and foremost, before we even start on this video, I hope you've gone out and checked out my other two previous videos to this. The first one is a study in technique, and the second one is objectives of the reverse punch. Not that you couldn't get something from the video that we're about to do. However, it would help you to have a basis to understand where we're coming from. So just click on up here and start off in that section and come back when you're through. As a quick refresher, remember we covered the upper body, the lower body objectives, the mental objectives, and the two action objectives of the starting point and the ending point. Now with this here, we're really going to cover three sets of other things that are just basically descriptions to the objectives we were looking at. Although this is not complete, it'll give us some basis for us to understand and study our own system of techniques that we want to learn. We'll start off with the punch and the general descriptions of it, then break it down with a few comments on punching and some common errors. One of the most important things that we have to cover is relaxation. Relaxation is more than understanding how to relax yourself. It's understanding how to relax the muscles, the positioning of your body, and how tense you need to be in order to get it to move properly, quickly, and efficiently. In order to do this and study this, we have to understand this by practicing the relaxation when we're punching and jabbing. Actually, to see if we can cause ourselves to become faster or see what's inhibiting us from doing it by studying the different agonistic and antagonistic muscles that there are out there. Along with the biomechanics of understanding relaxation, then you have to get into understanding your stances, mobility, and positioning of your feet and your knees when you're doing this. Your constant shifting in stances on how you start and end, and in between getting the technique to where you need it. As we stated in the previous video, you need to maintain your phasic position at all times. So albeit when you're trying to transition from your movements into a stance to deliver the punch, you really need to concentrate on the biomechanics of what's happening. One has to stay over the base of the foot, or the toe especially, in order to deliver it and maintain balance and good correct power to be delivered to the punch. As you can see here, I've got my elbow resting almost just against my body there in the rear. This is to promote having the fist a little forward and make it closer to the opponent. The other hand is out just slightly away from my body, giving me a little bit of distance but protecting my ribs at the same time. Both of these fists are constantly pointing towards the target. Now as you can see, we don't necessarily have to hit the target we're at, but in understanding how we can trace and follow through in our tactics and strategy is important that we keep all our weapons, including our feet, pointing towards our target. Hence, the hands and feet have to work together and have to point towards where you're intending to go. The same way with that front hand. Even though that front hand's out there, you're going to either jab, block, parry, whatever you need to do with it, but it has to be ready to do these positionings and not off in some general direction that you don't need. Now mind you, there are some people out there who will actually deliver the punch from the front stance or the front hand, but in this case we are talking about rear and rear crosses. Don't forget that. Make sure when that front hand is up there that there's no openings or positions that a person can get under or into. The ribs can easily be exposed if your hand and elbow are too far away from your body from that starting position. Sometimes that sounds simple, but you might need a second pair of eyes to help you even realize what you're doing wrong or missing. Also, great big mirrors, they help a lot. I use mirrors all the time when I don't have a second set of eyes helping me understand different techniques. These will help you correct the flaws in your biomechanics and give you a better feeling and understanding. In some cases, just take a video of yourself to make sure everything's working the way you expect. Now always remember, your hips before you punch should always be between 45 and 60 degrees. There's nobody sitting there with a tape measure telling you how far. It's all dependent on your body type, first of all. You have to be very careful of any demonstrative actions of going backwards that might telegraph the techniques coming in. So when you're training your hips to that 45 to 60 degree position, they should never move backwards right before you do a technique. Unless you're doing some sort of tactic with the front hand, trying to do a feint or otherwise to draw somebody in. But that's for a different video another day. Now, after doing your feints or preparatory attacks, when you're using the punch, it should at least come to a 90-degree angle on the stop. That way you can transfer your power and force more efficiently into the target. Now, remember, if you're doing a cross, you might go past the 90 because you're driving the power around past 90 and through. Of course, depending on what type of punch a person's trying to do, you must make sure you're hitting with the proper area of your knuckles. For most punches, you should hit with these two knuckles right in here as they're coming in. Now, if you're doing a half punch and you want to go to the diaphragm, you may be able to come in here and force the power up. But most of your punches, since they're going down at a 45-degree angle, will give you better penetration as long as you're reaching the center of your body or a downward angle of that punch. The next thing you have to understand is you have to focus your punch 1 to 3 inches into the intended target you're trying to hit. If you go too far past the target, you will start to lose power by pushing instead of hitting the opponent. And this will cause a general loss of power in trying to do that punch. Depending on the type of punch we're using, the hips will go around again, like I said, to the 90 degree or past if you're doing a cross. This will allow and help you to focus your punch on the target so that you can have a little bit of time on contact to transfer that power. So basically, let's go over these derived scientific actions that are taking place. First, the thrust is coming from the ground, which is then penetrating into a hip, which is coming around with the centrifugal motion as these hips torque. This will also then push the knee forward, giving you a forward momentum, and with gravity pulling, an actual bit of a little drop to help you use gravity to add into the power. Then as the punch launches from the hips like a catapult, remember the hips are launching, not the fist. The abdomens then come to contract as the contact of the fist hits the body. At that exact instant, when you can get all of those pieces to work together, the efficiency of your power will be much higher in respect to only doing a few things. If you're just swinging your arm, you're going to hit it with whatever your arm weighs. But the total body action needs to be understood in order to better process those punches, both scientifically and realistically. Now, in completely understanding this, speed and mass do come into play also. So you have to be aware there's a lot of forces in motion here to bring your punch to its conclusion. The time on contact is not like posing or anything like that, so when you hit your target, it's there for 1/100th of a second at the most, and then is immediately retracted and a second technique is followed through, or you move out of the way or move to whatever strategic or tactical positioning you're trying to accomplish. Now let's look over a few comments that we need to think about when we're doing a punch. This has very little to do with a scientific study, mind you, but to better understand the basic principles of how to defend yourself or use that technique when you need to. First thing you need to remember when you're using your rear hand as an attack, you need to make sure your lead or front hand is out in front of you, either to parry, set up your tactics, or do whatever is necessary to protect the body or help in applying the technique that you're trying to accomplish. The footwork has to always be maintained. Mobility factors, understanding that you're not changing your proof of stance to telegraph. This has to be very much ingrained in your practice as you train. Understanding each of the angles that you're going to apply, how the hands and feet positions are compared to the opposite person's stance. There's a lot that goes into understanding how an effective punch can be used. As was stated earlier, make sure you're retracting that punch fast enough so nobody grapples or traps it or whatever, and that it also allows you to help prepare in case you need to attack with that hand again. Always remember, your strategy and tactics should have a way of being able to add or prepare yourself for an oncoming attack of the opponent, either by thrusting yourself backwards, going at an angle, or maybe moving in for grappling on your own. So it's just dependent on the tactics and strategy, and make sure you apply them to what you're trying to accomplish with your punch. Now note, again, you don't have to use a fist in this kind of an action. You can use your heel of palm, you can use a leopard's paw, you can use open hand of shuto. There's many different ways you can use this same action, and you should test them to make sure they might apply better to certain strategies you're accomplishing, whether you're fighting hand to hand or somebody has a weapon against you. I know this is common sense, but to some people there's a lot of change in actions, and so they need to study the cases and the different ways that might need to be used with those kinds of cross and punch actions that are taking place. There's a lot more we could note on this, but remember, you have to eventually study and apply these notes to yourself and find your own comments and things that you need to know or remember in understanding or training someone how to use a punch. Actually make sure you get a partner and work with them so you actually see that your punches are working, or being able to find openings that you might use these punching with. Go ahead and use the tap system. I'll leave a link up here for you to try to go look at it and see how I would implore you to take your partner and work with them to see if your techniques really work. There'll be more coming out eventually on the tap system. I want to do a lot more on it, but I want to make sure everybody has the base ideas down. Let's get to the third category and the last category with its important ideas. Basically, what are the common errors that we find when we're doing this type of punching? A lot of people who are in classical styles tend to make the mistake of pulling their lead hand back when they're punching, maybe to their hips or waist or close to their body, which allows opponents to easily trap or control them. Although it's important for basics in kata, you have to train when you're free sparring at keeping those hands forward in case they needed to be employed for other reasons. It's unconventional for self-defense for you to pull your fist back. Keep it forward. And one note to make, when you're using a phasic position, make sure you're not going into a deep classical stance. In real self-defense situations, it's almost impossible to move properly when you're standing like that. Also, it lets the other people know that you've had some sort of training, and they'll probably employ some other type of tactic to throw you off. That's not to say that these training exercises aren't good for strengthening muscles. You have to consider, though, the reality of it when you need to use it. But you do need to have a good phasic position to keep from being swept or taken down, or to help deliver techniques correctly, such as the reverse punch we've been talking about here. It's always a good idea to study boxers, other martial artists, see how they handle them, and take good note, because there's a lot of different ways to keep that phasic position and mobility. So you have to take a lot of this into consideration. Nobody's the same in what they can do on that. Without a good phasic stance, you can't do the proper torque you need. Make sure your torquing power is coming from your waist when you're bringing those punches in. A lot of people try to use just the upper body in doing it and forget about the whole lower body action that actually provides more power than the weight of the body just torquing. The upper body needs to also be in play when you're using the lower body, but you need to try to get that total body action into the punch to help deliver better power. One last thing I want to cover is make sure when you're punching you keep your stomach slightly tense, and when you connect, make it tenser. You never know when an opponent's going to hit you in the stomach at the same time you're punching. It doesn't matter whether they're punching or throwing a technique, you have to make sure your abdomen is ready for any kind of impact that might be thrown at it. It really will help you to withstand more attacks and punches if you're not able to block or actually catch them. Remember, keep your hands up to protect your ribs. A lot of people will keep their hands out and not realize a good roundhouse kick to the ribs or a front kick to the ribs with hands extended out will easily take you out without much thought. It's important that you do these to keep your internal organs as safe as possible. Now in this lecture, there's a lot of things I could have gone further that I did not include, but to me you need to have at least these basics down to understand principles necessary for you to study your own techniques. Make sure you set out a regimen of what you're trying to study to better facilitate any ideas or common errors that might cause problems when you're trying to actually apply these techniques in a fight. I hope this helps you a little bit in creating your own personal studies for your techniques, and maybe it'll give you a good direction to start. In the future we plan to do some on kicking and other techniques that are used throughout martial arts systems that weren't readily in here. Every technique has its own unique abilities and ways you can facilitate it, so you need to make sure how a lot of these techniques are compared to by a punch. Now if you like this video, share it with your friends and tell them about what we're trying to accomplish here at Shihan's Dojo so we can continue to make videos for everyone out there. We're just trying to give you a different perspective on your martial arts studies, and hopefully you'll be able to apply these to what you're trying to accomplish in your system. Leave any other questions or comments you might have down there at the bottom, and don't forget the question of the day. What is your favorite type of punch to use in a self-defense situation? Again, thanks, and we'll see you again here at Shihan's Dojo.